Thank y'all for having me. Thank you for showing up. And thanks to all the people who will be watching this electronically either now or later. First, the commercial part of my program. I retired from UNT in August of 23. I stayed retired about 24 hours because I apparently suck at it, and decided to go help out some friends at the Texas State Historical Association, which I am now the director of publications and do about 5,000 other things. You don't want to look at my daily calendar. It's kind of scary. We are, and you've probably never heard of us, we are not the people who make the markers. That's the THC, Texas Historical Commission. We are the oldest academic organization in the state of Texas, having been organized in 1897. We are almost 130 years old now. We're the oldest academic press in the state of Texas. We have over 240 books since we've been publishing since 1918. We are the oldest continuously published academic journal in the country, not just Texas. We started in 1897. Yes, I'm sure you're running through your Rolodex and saying, but what about Connecticut? What about Massachusetts? They missed a few issues. We never have. So we're continuously published. And hopefully under my regime, that will continue unbroken. I do not want to have to answer that one. We also, if you've ever used the Handbook of Texas, that's us. It's now online. Been through several iterations since the 1950s. We now have over 28,000 articles on Texas history in the Handbook of Texas, and we're looking for more. So if you feel inspired to write something, talk to me. The Journal, Southwestern Historical Quarterly, we put 16 articles out a year, plus about 50 book reviews, and always looking for stuff to add to the Southwest collection, which is a news and notes section. We are the ones that produce the Junior Historian, which is for the middle schoolers and high schoolers. We produce Touchstone, which is a history journal for the college students. That leads me to, we are the guys that run Texas History Day. You may have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever. This year, we started with only about 65,000 of them in all the districts of Texas. By the time we willowed them down a little bit, the winners came to Austin for Texas History Day on April the 18th. I believe it was April the 11th. 1,200 of them, 18% more than last year. And we've been doing this almost 60 years now. The winners, by the way, are climbing on the buses and in mommy and daddy's cars and headed to Washington, D.C. tomorrow. So we have winners. Last year, Texans won more awards than any other children from any other state. And that's Kim Pena. Yep. She's running that program for us. So we work with the kiddos. We publish books. We publish a journal. We publish magazines for the students. We have a Handbook of Texas. It's 28,000 articles and growing. So no, we don't do the markers, sorry. But there's only about 12 or 13 of us, so we're pretty busy. And I'm very proud of my people. I'm proud of the people I work with. And we'd love to have you join us. If you want to be a member, if you want to be involved in events, we do events. We have an annual meeting each year, Texas Revolution Rendezvous, which is in April, in addition to Texas History Day. We're always looking for volunteers, not suckers, to be judges or just move the kids from room to room between their events or whatever it is they're doing at Texas History Day. That's really a big job, and we always need help with that. So having done all that, I'll say thanks for listening to my spiel, and now let's talk a little bit about Bernardo de Gálvez. Are we up here? Good. Now, truthfully, I was a professor for 41 years. And I can tell you that few people think or even write about the contribution of foreign countries to the patriot victory in the American Revolution. However, France and Spain specifically contributed greatly. How many people know that over half of George Washington's army at Yorktown were actually French soldiers? People don't know that. You think about it, all the country boys that were fighting from America, what they know about mortars and cannons, right? Let's get some professional Frenchmen in there to pound on Cornwallis's army. And of the Spanish contribution, Texas is going to play a significant part in that part of the story of the American Revolution. And that focuses almost entirely on the efforts of Bernardo de Gálvez. Now, I'm going to continue using Bernardo de Gálvez because my mouth would get tired of saying his entire name. Bernardo Vicente Apolinar de Gálvez de Madrid. Yeah, I know that's his whole name, but if I said that every time I got to it, we'd be here an extra half an hour. So most people know him as Bernardo de Gálvez. There is an accent in that name, and he's the one that played the biggest role in winning the American Revolution, particularly on the southern and southwestern frontier. And what's interesting is he learned a lot of his craft, a lot of what he employed in the South and Southwest, fighting Apaches in Texas and New Mexico. Now today, what do we know about Bernardo de Gálvez, other than the fact that the local DIR is named for him, which I find fascinating? Galveston, right? Guess what Texas City does not have a memorial or a monument to Gálvez? Galveston. We'll circle around to that. However, just knowing that he's the guy they named Galveston for is only a tiny piece of the story. And so that's where we'll start. As Paul Harvey used to say, and now for the rest of the story. So when did Spain enter the American Revolution? Well, they dragged their heels a little bit, but they officially declared war on Great Britain in June of 1779, almost 3 years after the Declaration of Independence. Now, what they're really interested in is avenging what happened to them in what we call the French and Indian War, and in Europe they call it the 7 Years' War. Having joined up on the wrong side and having lost to Great Britain in the 7 Years' War, in 1763, Spain lost Florida, almost all of Florida except for what we call the Florida parishes down home in Louisiana. But they would like to have that back. They would also like to have vengeance on the British. The British had attacked several points, other pieces of land around the world that Spain lost. Now, Spain arguably didn't do badly in the 1763 treaty. That's how they gained Spanish Louisiana, and we'll circle back to that because that's where Bernardo de Gálvez will be serving as governor when he actually joins the war in 1779. But they really didn't see it that way. They looked at it in terms of yet another defeat after centuries of defeat at the hands of not only the British but other European rivals. So, eager to jump in, Spain will join the war in tandem with the French in the late spring of 1779. Now, what does that mean? That means Spanish royal agents and individual Spaniards will organize secret shipments of supplies to American patriots. That means Spain will also provide vital strategic and financial support to the French Navy that won the fight for Washington at Yorktown. If it hadn't been for the French Navy, Washington would probably still be sitting at Yorktown waiting for Cornwallis to surrender. But most striking of all are going to be Bernardo de Gálvez's operations along the Mississippi River and the Gulf Coast. And if you look up here in red, those are his 4 victories that he will win, one after the other from 1779 through about 1880. And he'll be planning others when the war suddenly ends and cancels his plans for a nice trip for him and his troops to a place called Jamaica. Wouldn't that have been something? Bunch of Texans and Longhorns aboard ships landing in Jamaica, 1783. That would have caught a few people's attention, but that didn't happen. So who's Bernardo de Gálvez? Well, here's a lovely picture of him. This was done in 1785 when he was approximately 39 years old. He was born in 1746 in the province of Malaga, and that's what's highlighted here in this little outline map of Spain. Malaga has mountains on one side and the coast on the other. He grew up in the mountain side of Malaga. His father was a minor royal official, and so that's probably where young Bernardo de Gálvez was headed from an early age. When he was still a kid, they actually shipped him off to Avila. This is the medieval town today, but there was a military academy there. So even when he was a kid, he's already on that military track. As I laughingly used to explain to my students, this is the land of primogeniture. The oldest son gets everything, so all the other brothers have to scramble. You can either go into business, which was not very exciting, go to the church, or you can go to the army. Bernardo chooses the army. And at the age of 8, he'll enroll at the academy. By the time he is 16 years old, he's a professional soldier. Like I said, not many choices. By the time he came to New Spain in 1769, he had already fought in several major military campaigns. And if you're keeping up with the math, he's 23 years old. He's a veteran of Spain's invasion of Portugal. He is a veteran of some fights along the north coast of Africa, and he's already at the age of 23 a lieutenant in the Spanish army. When he arrives, he is assigned to the Northern Frontier Defense Forces, and so his baptism of fire is going to be fighting Mescalero Apache in southern New Mexico. That should have been a shock to him. They didn't exactly behave like Portuguese regular soldiers, did they? By 1770, 1 year later, he was appointed commandant of the Nueva Vizcaya and Sonora frontier soldiers. So he's moved from lieutenant, he's now commander of all the forces in Nueva Vizcaya, which you can see, we see the gray part is Spanish Louisiana. If you click down through Nuevo Mexico, or New Mexico, then you'll see Nueva Vizcaya. Sonora is up and to the left or to the west of that. So at the age of 23, he's a commandant of all the frontier forces, and he's given a new job. He's to relocate refocus on the Lipan Apache, who have been raiding a lot of the local communities that are trying to grow up ranches mostly in this area. So he's going now, not to New Mexico, but this will bring him to Texas itself. In November of 1770, he'll set out from Chihuahua, cross the Rio Grande with 250 professional soldiers. Where is he headed? He's headed to find the Lipan. The trouble is, let's just leave it on this for a second, it's November. Now, Texas can be very moderate in November, or it can be absolutely miserable, can it? It was absolutely miserable. They are soaking wet, freezing rain almost every day. They run out of food because their provisions spoil. So now they're hungry, wet, and cold. Many at this point of his professional soldiers hightailed it back to Chihuahua. They deserted. I'm sure they had a tale to tell when they got back. So by the time Gálvez reaches, and here we are, what's now Horsehead Crossing on the Pecos River, and I put up this little map so you can kind of get your bearings as to where that is, out near Fort Stockton. He's only got 130 men left with him. That means almost half his force has left. Now, that's not counting he had picked up some Indian scouts along the way who he's become quite admiring of. They seem to be a lot more durable than his Spanish soldiers. Now, he did not call this place Horsehead Crossing. He was very proud of his dad. His dad will end up being viceroy of all New Spain. In fact, his dad passing away as viceroy is why Bernardo de Gálvez will end up being the next viceroy of New Spain. But he'll name it Matias Crossing. Nobody remembers that today, but here's Matias de Gálvez. This is Bernardo's dad. Any of y'all ever been to Horsehead Crossing? Man, you talk about the middle of nowhere. You get the idea looking at this picture. See any ranches out there? McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut? No. It is the middle of nowhere, and it's very dry most of the time. So if you were a Spanish soldier, you're already wet, cold, and hungry. This looks like hell, doesn't it? And the words are going around among the ranks that they might all just leave for Chihuahua. What are they eating by this time? They are eating tuna, cactus. They had some green dates that hadn't rotted yet. Those are delicious. As I said, they are pretty much ready to go home. And this is where Gálvez really steps up and shows that leadership that's going to make him such a winner in Louisiana several years later. We have from his report the speech that he gave to them on the Pecos River in 1770, probably in a freezing rain, after a sumptuous repast of green dates. Soldiers, our time has come. This is our last chance to show our mettle to the world. You have confronted cold and snow with joy. We have seen hunger thanks to rain sent from the heavens that has spoiled our supplies. I know not how many days or months before we face the enemy, but should we go to Chihuahua now, we will blush for shame at the time and money we will have wasted. I will go on alone, yo solo, even if none of you come with me. I will bring back a scalp to Chihuahua, or I will die earning the king's bread that I have eaten. Over yonder is the road for home. Be gone if your heart is base, but follow me if you yearn for glorious fight and no other reward than the grace of God. Remember what the Spanish conquistadors always fought for: God, gold, and glory. Well, he's got no gold for them, but they're still fighting for the grace of God and their personal glory. With that, Gálvez recalled that he spurred his horse into the swollen stream. Not there, but okay. Miserably cold. And allegedly, he reported to his superiors, his men followed him, shouting, "We will follow you to our deaths. We will eat our own horses, and then the very stones themselves." So they could make a good speech too, couldn't they? That does show that he's got leadership. He's got some strength there, and people are willing to follow him. So the next day, his scouts, his Indian scouts, picked up the trail. His men followed him through the night. They settled near where they had found their Lipan enemies, and they silently waited in the dark and the cold and the rain, waiting for attack at dawn. As the sun came up, they surrounded the Lipan camp. At first light, Gálvez yelled the ancient battle cry of Castile, Santiago, St. James, and led the charge into the village. Now, of course, the Lipan were not expecting this. Some of them jumped into the river, where many of them drowned. Spaniards chased down the few who reached the other side. They captured 36 men and women, along with 204 horses and mules, and killed 28 Apache warriors, Lipan warriors. Gálvez did not lose a single soldier. What were the lessons learned? What will we see maybe in Louisiana? Well, first, he's now going to understand that you have to lead by example, don't you? You have to be the leader in the situations. But he also had earned a strong admiration for the resiliency, the skills, the craft, the mobility of not just the Lipans, but his own Indian allies. He had noticed time and again the Indians outrode his heavier Spanish cavalry, partly because they just weren't encumbered with a lot of the equipment that a Spanish soldier had to carry. He also noticed that they appeared to be very good at sneaking, slipping up on the enemy, whichever side that might be. And so we'll see that he'll come back, and that army he leads out of New Orleans to Baton Rouge, there'll be a lot of Indians with him there. So now what? Well, he's going to hang out for a couple more years on the Spanish frontier of New Spain. He'll suffer 2 more serious wounds, but survive it. In other words, more combat experience in the field out here in the wilds of West Texas. Then he heads back to Spain. Why? Because Uncle Jose de Gálvez has been recalled to the court at Madrid to be given command of the entire the entire Indies operations of Spain. Now you begin to figure out that Bernardo de Gálvez not only has his own personal abilities, he's got connections, doesn't he? His dad's going to be the Viceroy of New Spain. His uncle is going to be the one that tells his dad what to do, because he's going to be in charge, the secretary that is in charge of all the Indies operations, which is the Caribbean. So he goes home with Uncle Jose de Gálvez, and while Jose de Gálvez gets busy with his new job, Bernardo stays in the army. He's going to go to France as an attaché, essentially. That wasn't combat service. Then he'll go into combat again in Algiers, northern Africa. There he was seriously wounded and almost died. So somewhat incapacitated, he'll be assigned to the military academy at Avila. Remember, that's his alma mater, where he'll be promoted to colonel and made an instructor. He's a career Army guy, isn't he? He's got attaché experience now. He's got administrative experience. He has combat experience. And now, like they do with so many of them, they throw him into their version of West Point and tell him to teach the little ones what he knows. So he'll spend several years at Avila as an instructor. And remember, how old is he by this time? 30. He's been a soldier for 14 years. He's only 30 years old. So how do we get him to Louisiana? This is Spanish Louisiana. Notice how many of our modern-day states it covers. It's a good gig. How many of you have been to the Cabildo in New Orleans? Been on Jackson Square and seen the Presbytery on one side, the Cabildo on the other? The Presbytery being where the French officials stayed when they came and ran Louisiana, the Cabildo being where the Spanish stayed when they came, the parts they owned, the times they were in charge. Uncle Jose de Gálvez gets him an appointment as governor of Louisiana. So he leaves the military academy and comes to Louisiana in 1777. By this time, we have a revolution in what's going to be the United States, don't we? So Gálvez has no love for the British. Remember, they stole Florida, right? They humiliated his beloved Spain in 1773 when he was a very young officer. So he'll develop a network of friends and allies and pretty much close the Mississippi River to British trade. Meanwhile, he helps Americans, French, and Spanish get their connections in New Orleans, get their network set up. And for all this effort over the next 2 years, and this is before Spain officially joins the war, Gálvez will be rewarded by Spain with a promotion to brigadier general, and the U.S. Continental Congress will send him their official thanks in 1778 for harassing the British, interfering with their logistics. And the British are as close as Mobile, Pensacola, Baton Rouge, but the whole Mississippi River network, go up and take a hard right up the Tennessee or across on the Ohio, that's a good way to feed the British armies on the western frontier, and Gálvez is shutting that down. So the Continental Congress was very appreciative of his efforts. Openly anti-British. The British were not so pleased with him. Now, then comes the declaration of war, and Brigadier General Bernardo de Gálvez in New Orleans as governor of Spanish Louisiana is ready. So he assembles a force, gathers some ships, and a hurricane hit him. I'm sure he didn't take the hint. He lost most of his boats that he was going to use to move up the river. His headquarters was ruined, lost a lot of his supplies. He was ready to go. He was going to go jump on those British at Baton Rouge and Natchez, and then Mother Nature took it away from him. Now, others might have decided to give up, stick with the harass the British policy. It could be argued that maybe some other European commanders might just quit and go home, capitulate, give up. Not Bernardo de Gálvez. Instead, he will gather what's left of his soldiers, recruit a bunch of local militia, a bunch of random volunteers, some of whom we do believe came from Texas, and some of whom were actually free blacks. He had African Americans, he had Tejanos, he had Creoles, Cajuns, just a whole motley crew, professional British soldiers, and even got a group of Indians to join him, about 150, 160. He figures that's enough. He's going to go take the fight to the British, and he will actually lead this force in frontal assaults on British positions, and they'll follow him. Now, he's sending back regular reports that are pretty interesting to his uncle, because his uncle, remember, is in charge of all this. He's waiting back in Madrid, eagerly reading any reports he gets from his nephew. I'm sure Gálvez didn't give him all the details. Remember, he lost his boats, right? So they're going to have to walk from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. Y'all familiar with that area? I grew up down there. I think the artist did a fantastic job of showing how miserable it can be. And remember, this is August, September, October. It's muggy, isn't it? And bugs and alligators and snakes and creepy crawlies all over the place. Yeah. He doesn't tell him that. He writes to his uncle on August 27th, 1779, "Our little army left New Orleans, made up of 170 veterans," that's all he's got left of his army, 330 raw recruits, I'm sure they were of all flavors and stripes, right? 20 customs officers who probably were not happy. That's not what they signed up for, right? I'm here to inspect ships and collect taxes. Now I'm walking through this god-awful swamp with this lunatic. 60 militia had agreed to join him. Blacks, Creoles, mixed mulattoes, freedmen mostly. Walking with him through the swamps, again, probably wondering what he's doing there, the Continental Congress had sent an agent from their councils named Oliver Pollock, who showed up with a staff of 7. I always kind of picture these guys in knee breeches and white stockings and buckles on their shoes, right? Well, now they're trudging through the swamp with Bernardo de Gálvez. He needs every hand on board that he can get, right? And he's got a pretty motley crew. Some of them claim to be American officers and soldiers, but they were no more soldiers at that time than most of the volunteers in the Patriot Army. He was joined along the way by 600 Arcadians. We'd call them Cajuns, right? And then some German speakers came out of the swamp to join him, somewhere down along the coast. He did want Indians with him, so as he went through the swamps, he gathered about 150, as I said, Opelousas and Attakapas. Again, these are sedentary. Attakapas actually scatter all the way down the coast into Texas. I noticed on the other night I was watching Roadshow, Antiques Roadshow, and they had Attakapan baskets. And I thought, well, there's a small world. But he told his uncle that he wanted to take more allies on his campaign. Like the Apaches, they are fleet of foot, skillful, and sure shots with a bow and arrow. After all, they won't run out of ammunition, right? Of course, his uncle hands over these reports to the big royal official newspaper. So the Gazeta de Madrid, the Madrid Gazette, is reporting as Bernardo Gálvez slogs his way through the swamps, quote, "The ardor with which these troops march is inexplicable." Yeah. They are marching, as they wrote, because Gálvez had written earlier and was following the rules that both his Spaniards and his allies should be treated with, quote, respect and friendship. He believed, quote, if treated kindly, they become so obedient that they will not complain even if you're leading them to their deaths. I'm sure none of his men were reading that. They would write not. Like I said, they're going to slog through a bug-infested humidity of a Louisiana late summer, early fall, and arrive at a place called Fort Butte. There we go. Here's New Orleans. They've come all the way up almost to Baton Rouge, and there's a log fort out there in the swamps that the British should have been posting called Fort Butte. But the British only left a small defensive force, and so Gálvez lined up his 60 militiamen, put his father-in-law in charge, and had them attack straight on. Well, of course, they're militia. What else do they know? Any fancy maneuver? There's the fort, go take it. And daddy-in-law leads the charge. I love that. I bet he didn't tell his wife that he put his dad out her dad out in the front ranks. Then he moved to Baton Rouge, and this time things are getting pretty serious. Many of his men by this time are sick. They've been marching through, quote, 90 leagues of thick forest swamp, all but impassable, without tents, without any other equipment, usually thought essential. Again, I'm quoting from his reports that were then posted in the newspapers. The Spanish are watching all this. They're fascinated. Fort Butte was a little log fort. The fortifications at Baton Rouge have thick earthen walls, wooden palisades, and a moat. They have 13 cannons in there. 500 defenders, 400 of whom are professional British soldiers. But what's Gálvez going to do? Now, remember, this is an instructor from the Avilian Military Academy, right? Probably not going to be a smart thing to line up 50 or 60 militia led by your father-in-law and tell them charge, right? That's not going to work. So what he did is he had a group of his men start digging an earthwork on one side of this big British entrenchment, this fort. And so the British are watching this with great interest. Gálvez takes the two little cannons that he brought with him and put them on the far side of the fort and started pounding on that side of the fort at close range, because the British, having decided that that earthwork was what their attention should be focused on, paid no attention apparently to this masked battery, is what he'd actually put out there, that all of a sudden just opened up at close range. His guns fired dozens of shots, perhaps as many as 100, into the fort at close range. That convinced the British to give up. Probably, I'm thinking, I've not read the official report all the way through, they probably breached the walls, and that gives the guy inside the decision. Does he want to risk the attack? And by the way, if you offer a breached fort the offer to quit or capitulate and he refuses, then all bets are off when you get in the fort. Remember the Shakespeare, Henry V, cry havoc and loose the dogs of war? If you did not capitulate, that allowed your attacker, if he got inside the walls, there's no quarter, there's no guarantees. So the British commander, I think, faced with that possibility, surrendered not only the fort at Baton Rouge, but he sent word to his subordinate up at Natchez to surrender his fort too. So both Baton Rouge and Fort Panmure have been surrendered by the British. Panmure, excuse me. This stunned the British commander in the area. His headquarters is all the way over at Pensacola, which you can see there. His name was John Campbell. He reported to London that his opponent, Bernardo de Gálvez, had moved so swiftly and so effectively stopped any communication or intelligence of his movement being sent to this place that he had nearly effected the reduction of the western part of this province before we at Pensacola had the smallest communication of his having commenced hostilities. He's amazed at how fast Gálvez moved through that swamp without boats, took not only Baton Rouge but the two outlying forts. More important than that, for Gálvez, King Charles III of Spain was so impressed with what he read in the newspapers and heard from, let's get this going again. That Charles will make him, I think we need to pop this down twice. I got one out of sequence. The first ever Count of Gálvez. Not bad for a guy who's, remember, he's maybe 33 years old. But he's not done. In 1780, having rested his army and reinforced, Bernardo de Gálvez will take Mobile, Alabama. And I went out there this past spring. There are markers that just are marveling at his operations at Mobile, where again he reduced a major British fortification. And then John Campbell, Major General, British Army, looked out over the fortifications of Pensacola, and Bernardo de Gálvez, by March of 1780, is pounding on his door. And by this time, Gálvez has 7,000 troops. Campbell doesn't have 7,000 troops. Now, Campbell had gambled that since Gálvez by this time is having to use ships to come in, that the British Navy will keep Pensacola safe. Bernardo de Gálvez, again, just like he did on the Pecos, he comes in, he's the commander of the expedition. The captains of the ships tell him, look, our Spanish fleet is not nearly as strong as that British fleet that waits inside that harbor for us. If you've ever been to Pensacola, it's a huge open sound there with plenty of good deep water. And allegedly, again, he gave one of his speeches in which he ended by shouting at the captains that he would go into the bay by himself. Yo solo again, right? If they wouldn't cooperate. When he takes Pensacola and he's made the first Count of Gálvez, check it out. What motto is on his crest? Yo solo. I alone. I alone will go across the Pecos River. I alone will sail into Pensacola. Seems to be a plan that works for him, right? So, got to give him his props. So, Gálvez's campaign, I would argue, was a masterwork of courage. He could have given up and not marched through the swamps. Leadership, he kept those armies together, not only made them hang together, but they got larger. He's a good improviser. The little stunt he pulled at Baton Rouge was pretty clever. Tactics, well, that's a pretty good evidence of it at Baton Rouge. This will all bring him the glory that he sought and give a taste of long-delayed military success for Spain and North America. Again, the official royal newspaper, the Gazeta de Madrid, published a story of Gálvez at Baton Rouge in its 1780 New Year's edition. New Year's Day special edition. Gálvez is the feature child. A courier brought to the Madrid court, King Charles III, not only Gálvez's official papers documenting what had happened, but several flags captured from the British at Baton Rouge, and later others were brought from Mobile and Pensacola. You can go to Spanish museums today, and they proudly display flags captured by Bernardo de Gálvez in 1779, 1780. This is Bernardo de Gálvez as Viceroy of New Spain, because once he pulls this operation off and it's a success, He's going to be promoted then from brigadier to lieutenant general and then field marshal. He'll be made governor and captain general of both Louisiana and Florida because of his successes and successes elsewhere. The 1783 treaty ending the American independence movement, the American Revolution, gave Florida back to Spain. A big coup for them. And so guess who the first military governor of the restored Florida is? Bernardo de Gálvez. He then will be given command of all Spanish forces in North America. Again, he's moving up the track. That will give him the opportunity to capitalize. He will actually be the guy who occupies Nassau in the Bahamas at one point. That just pisses the British off, right? And like I said, he was planning to land in Jamaica, but the end of hostilities, the Spanish had to tell him to cool his jets. Charles III, though, is so impressed, he'll go on and make him a knight. If you see that blue ribbon there with that beautiful medal on his chest, that's the order that he was made a knight in. That's the medal that was pinned on his chest by King Charles III. So what's left for a guy who's pretty much hit the top of the charts as far as being a military guy? He'll move into quasi-civilian occupations now. They'll make him governor of Cuba, which is even a better post than Louisiana because Cuba makes money and Spanish Louisiana doesn't. And then when his father died in 1784, he was made Viceroy of New Spain. And that's when this painting was made of him with all of his regalia. You know, how long was he Viceroy of New Spain? 2 years. He died of typhus in 1786. 40 years old. That's all he had, age of 40. Only 7 years after taking Baton Rouge, they're holding his funeral. So why does the Spanish seem to be so happy with him? Well, remember what they got into the war for. Florida, other lands around the world. Gálvez gave them Florida. The patriots are very pleased in the United States. His victory undermined the British military presence all along the southern and southwestern frontier. This is a big high point in the history of Spain. If you look at the history of Spain on the northern frontier, New Mexico and Texas specifically, it's been a real dismal record for about 300 years. I mean, think about it, guys. The conquistadors came here looking for God, gold, and glory. Most of them died without finding any gold. Efforts to build the missions were very spotty. In fact, there was a long period of neglect of almost 100 years. When Spain had tried after the Spanish intrusion to push their presence in Texas, it was not successful in many ways. I mean, they got their footprint on the ground, and absolutely they should get the credit for that, but they didn't get out of it what they wanted. Now suddenly, after so much time, this guy comes out of Texas, where he's been fighting Lipon and Mescalero, and wins this tremendous campaign against professional British troops. I mean, this is like losing the World Cup for 100 years, right? And then finally pulling it off. You'd make that coach a hero, and this is your coach. I mean, it's an interesting contrast. In 1691, one of the early efforts, which would be roughly 80 years earlier, the first Spanish governor of Texas, Domingo Terán y de los Rios, sailed back to Spain from Matagorda Bay, writing in his report, "No civilized person has ever seen a worse place." That was us. Like I said, another century of neglect. So how shocked must they have been when this guy comes out of Texas, supported partially by Texans? And there weren't just Texas volunteers. We argue to this day exactly how many Texas cattle those guys ate while they were on the march to Baton Rouge, Mobile, and Pensacola. We've documented that thousands of cattle went out of Texas. We just argue whether it's 2,000 or 10,000. But it's what keeps people coming to the conferences, so don't interrupt, and they're happy. They like to do sessions on that. Like I said, he made the Spanish very happy. He got official recognition. And then we forgot him. That's one of the interesting parts of the story. This is the first ever statue that Americans ever put up to Bernardo de Gálvez. In 1967, almost 200 years after he won at Mobile, Pensacola, and Baton Rouge, they put up the first statue to him in Mobile. It's almost like, oh yeah, he was here, wasn't he? Yes, he was. It'll accelerate, though, as we move through our bicentennial. That's when he seems to be more rediscovered, in part because the Spanish are sending over some interesting messages to us. For example, they donated this beautiful statue. Spain paid for this statue that the National Park Service now maintains in Washington, D.C. It's up on Virginia Avenue. Look at the year, 1976. It was their gift to us for our bicentennial. Makes sense, doesn't it? Spain sent us a statue of the guy that helped us win our independence. Others came. Pensacola decided, well, if Washington has one, maybe we should have one. So they put up this rather modest bust. I don't know if you can read the inscription right underneath the bust. Can you see it? Yo solo, I alone. By the way, there was a recent book on Bernardo de Gálvez. I'll give you 3 guesses and one doesn't count what the title of the book is. Yo solo, right? Wouldn't you? They have a bigger one now. I guess they got embarrassed and decided they might have a nicer one. So in 2018, they took up, well, they haven't actually got all the money yet. They put this statue up, but they still are $20,000 short of the goal of paying for it. So unless you want to see it repoed, maybe you ought to go send them a check. Just a plug for them. They needed $400,000, and apparently they've raised about $380,000 so far. I visited this back in May. It's a beautiful piece. Spain decided to redecorate, remodel their Spanish embassy in D.C. in 2018, and that was the occasion to put in another statue, one less military and more the civilian side of Bernardo de Gálvez. Do we have any statues of Bernardo de Gálvez in Texas? We got one, and it ain't in Galveston. It's in McCaslin. Now, I understand we have some DAR members here. This is the DAR that put up a statue of Bernardo de Gálvez in McCaslin at their Veterans Memorial, and it just went up 2 years ago. Hopefully it'll stay. You know, we have this zeal right now to take down statues for whatever reason we think we've got. But for this moment, these are some very happy ladies, aren't they? So that's why I decided to include them. Again, not an equestrian statue. Those are terribly expensive. But a nice statue of Bernardo de Gálvez. This is one of my favorites. This one is actually in New Orleans, where he served as the Spanish governor of Louisiana. The reason I show it in this condition is it's recently been refurbished. They took it all down and had it all cleaned up and repaired and reinstalled a few months ago, 2026. This again was a gift from Spain in 1976. And guess where they had to send it to get fixed up and cleaned? Kemah. There's a company in Kemah, Texas that took care of Bernardo de Gálvez. So if we already got one in McCaslin and we got a company down in Kemah that can take care of these things, we ought to have a statue, right? Maybe in Galveston? Well, they got plans. This is the artist's rendition. It's going to be a plaza. The whole plaza named for Bernardo de Gálvez. You can see the sign there. An equestrian statue with the horse reared up. Does this look familiar to any of y'all have ever visited Jackson Square in New Orleans? So the statue that stands of Andrew Jackson in front of the Cabildo in New Orleans is almost the exact same pose and the exact same model of a horse. I wonder if there's a coincidence there or they're being very deliberate. But hopefully they'll get this together. Again, the problem is money. These things are not inexpensive. So what about official recognition? Finally, in 2014, the U.S. Congress, we got some statues up, right? And Spain's giving us gifts, really nice statues of Bernardo de Gálvez. We finally got around in 2014, Congress made him an honorary U.S. citizen. Now that doesn't sound overwhelming, does it? How about this factoid, though? At the time they did that, he's one of only 8 people ever granted honorary U.S. citizenship. More impressive now, isn't it? Now, I don't know what's happened since then. I tried to find out, and those, our government's gotten kind of secretive, just in case you hadn't noticed that. But in 2014, he was the number 8 person ever in over 260 years, right, to be named an honorary U.S. citizen. And at that point, they had this painting commissioned, and it hangs in the U.S. Capitol building. So our congressman can walk by every day and say hello to Bernardo de Gálvez. It's a big honor. It's very important. Problem is, for me as a historian, and I still am that. I've been that for a long time. There hadn't been a whole lot of attention paid to him in the scholarly ranks. How many of you studied your high school, middle school, maybe even college history? Did they ever mention him in the stories of the American Revolution? No. Rarely does his contribution get mentioned. We talk about the French, but we don't talk much about Spain. So I would like to see that corrected, and this is our 250th anniversary, right? Be a good time to start. Now, there are a few books out there. They're of varying qualities, but nobody's ever really brought out a book that I think is, in my opinion, worthy of Bernardo de Gálvez and his contributions. Part of it, I think, is because as Americans, we like to think we did it all ourselves, right? We didn't need the French, we didn't need the Spanish, but no, we did need the world to come to our aid, and they did come to our aid, and we ought to remember that. And we ought to be better neighbors, we ought to be better friends, and we ought to honor those who did do what they needed to do to win our liberty and our independence. And one of those is this crazy guy, Bernardo de Gálvez, who dragged a small army through the swamps of South Louisiana when apparently everybody else in the world, including Mother Nature, was conspiring against him. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions. You can clap. I'll take it. Thanks.
Questions, comments, protests. This is a library. We can say what we want.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on just a second. Let me bring the mic to you so we can catch it on tape.
Let's make Tom run a lot, okay?
Thank you.
Oops,
This was
he gave it to somebody else. We'll be back.
Thank you for your time. Who are the other 7 people who have been honorary U.S. citizens, sir? Do you know?
No, I didn't look that up. That'd be an interesting topic.
I think Churchill's one, but I think.
That makes sense. I would think it'd be high ups like that.
Questions, comments, protests.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Though. Yes, ma'am.
Let me do this.
Oops.
Hi. You mentioned that there were others that joined Gálvez's
Yes.
army. How did that happen? It seemed
Because
like
they were
lot.
rounding up cattle in south around the Nueces and San Antonio River valleys. And so I think what happened, and what I can tell from, I've talked to a few people about this, the Donativo. They say that these drovers, these cowboys that brought the cattle over, some of them joined up with Gálvez for the adventure. It was a long walk home back through the swamps of South Louisiana, whatever reason. He did pay money. You know,
I was amazed you mentioned the French, Germans, all kinds of Tejanos.
Well, the Cajuns are mad at the British. The Germans hate the British. So this is a chance to go kick a British guy, right?
What were the numbers of volunteers? How many volunteers did they estimate?
300, let me think about that. Let me look back at my notes. 330 raw recruits, so those are going to be volunteers, right? Customs office, 60 militiamen, those would count as volunteers, so we're up to 390. And then 600 Cajuns and German speakers came out of the swamp, so about 1,000.
Before social media, that's impressive.
Yeah. It is. Well, you know, how much is really going on down there in South Louisiana at that time? This is the biggest show in town.
I just thought you would like to know that Carol here, she joined the DAR for a Louisiana militiaman who fought under Gálvez, and she's got a couple other ones.
Neat. Awesome. Do you know any of their stories? Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Oh,
Did they make it back would be my first question.
everyone that I know made it back, yes.
Otherwise you wouldn't be
Yeah,
here, right?
they're from our, Avoyelles Parish in Louisiana. There's about, I would say about 50 of them in that one little area.
Were they old Acadians? I mean, you're in
They were
Avoyelles
all
Parish.
French. They were all of them were French.
Yeah.
And
You're in
they were
Avoyelles
part of
Parish,
the-
you're pretty much
They were
gonna
part of
be.
the Filet de Roy. They were also part of, they all came into New Orleans. And we're on the German coast, which is down there along the river. And
Yeah, Côte
so
de
that's
Allemande.
the Germans probably that were joining as well.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Côte d'Allemande, but yeah.
That's an incredible story. Write it down. Questions, comments? Okay.
Anybody else? We're back.
So when did, eventually that area was controlled by the French, correct?
Yes, briefly when, remember Napoleon will send his brother Joseph in to take the throne of Spain and throw out Ferdinand VII. And that's when Louisiana will briefly revert to French control. And then we have that famous story that Napoleon wanted to build up his North American empire. So he'll send a force that first lands at Haiti, and about half of them die of yellow fever, cholera, and typhus. So allegedly Napoleon threw a temper tantrum and said, "Damn the colonies, I renounce Louisiana." And about that time, our negotiators showed up and bought it. Jefferson sent over the two negotiators with a blank check, who were stunned. They were just going to go try to buy the right of trade through New Orleans, get the port opened up, and they were told for the same amount of cash you can own all of Louisiana. And okay, sounds good. Yeah,
At
that's what
that time, Louisiana Purchase was a lot of the western United States, correct, in Midwest, kind of?
Yes and no. Main problem is they didn't have an established western boundary. And that's what Talleyrand allegedly, you know, I love these stories, you can tell. The French foreign minister, when we signed the paperwork and gave him the $15 million check, we said, okay, so where's the western boundary? And he said, you have made a noble bargain. I'm sure you'll make the best of it. And that's why Jefferson then, as you know, starts sending out Lewis and Clark, Zebulon Pike, and all these others trying to probe, because Jefferson truly believed that the western boundary was the Rio Grande. The Spanish didn't agree. That was a completely different province, as you could see from the map we had up.
You know, when you mentioned these swamps, I've been down there, and mosquitoes are just swarm. It's amazing. He survived the mosquitoes, but then got typhus somewhere else. And of course, the yellow fever was rampant down there.
Every summer brought a yellow fever outbreak, almost every summer.
Any other questions, comments, protests? By the way, the Daughters of the American Revolution have this punch that's red, white, and blue. Go see for yourself. Thank y'all for coming.